Daniel leaned back in his chair, still puzzled by the young woman who now sat across from him. The restaurant was nearly empty, the clinking of cutlery fading as the staff began to clean up for the night. Emily, as she had introduced herself, held her fork with care, as though even the smallest bite of food deserved respect. She didn't devour the meal like someone starved for days, but instead ate slowly, savoring each mouthful. That alone intrigued him. He found himself watching her closely, trying to piece together the fragments of her story. "You could have gone anywhere," he finally said, breaking the silence. "Why here? Why me?" Emily lifted her eyes, those same eyes that had stopped him cold when she first approached. "Because I saw kindness in your face," she replied softly. "And sometimes, that's all a person needs, a chance." Her words settled over him like a weight. Daniel, a man who had spent years surrounded by business partners, employees, and so-called friends, couldn't remember the last time someone looked at him and spoke with such sincerity. She wasn't flattering him, nor was she expecting anything more. She was simply telling the truth. As she continued, her story unfolded with quiet strength. Emily had been a promising student, once dreaming of becoming a teacher. But after her mother's sudden illness and passing, she was left with her younger brother, Michael, to care for. She worked 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, until the company she worked for shut down unexpectedly. From there, the spiral began: late rent notices, piling bills, and eventually eviction. Yet even in recounting her hardships, there was no bitterness in her voice. Only determination. "I don't mind working," she said firmly, setting her fork down. "I just haven't had a chance to prove myself again." Daniel listened, his chest tightening. He was accustomed to negotiations where every word was calculated, every sentence laced with hidden motives. But here was a woman with nothing to gain, offering him nothing but honesty. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ashamed of the untouched meals he had wasted, of the fortune he hoarded while people like Emily struggled to survive. The waiter approached, asking if they needed anything else. Daniel waved him off and leaned closer. "Emily," he said, his voice lower, "you don't deserve leftovers. You deserve a fresh start." She blinked, unsure how to respond, but the faintest flicker of hope touched her face. Daniel didn't elaborate that night, but in his mind, something had already shifted. The loneliness that had shadowed him for years had cracked open, replaced with a strange warmth he hadn't expected. As they rose from the table and stepped into the night air, Emily hugged her coat tighter around herself. Daniel offered his jacket without thinking. She hesitated, then accepted, and for the first time since their conversation began, she smiled. It was then he realized, what started as a simple request for leftovers was about to change his life forever. The days that followed felt different for Daniel, though he couldn't quite explain why. He found himself thinking about Emily more often than he expected. The way she spoke with dignity despite her circumstances lingered in his mind. For years, he had built walls around his heart, convincing himself that success was enough, that the numbers in his accounts could fill the silence of his nights. Yet after one dinner with a woman who asked for nothing but his leftovers, those walls felt fragile. He arranged a position for her in one of his smaller offices, a place where she could ease back into steady work without being overwhelmed. When he told her about the opportunity, she looked at him in disbelief, as though kindness of that magnitude was foreign. "Are you sure?" she asked cautiously. "I don't want charity. I just want to earn an honest living." Her words only deepened his respect for her. "That's exactly why I'm offering," he replied. "Because I know you'll give it your all." And she did. Emily threw herself into the work with a determination that impressed even the most skeptical of his employees. She was punctual, meticulous, and always willing to take on more than her share. But beyond her efficiency, what struck Daniel most was the way she treated everyone, with warmth, with patience, with a genuine interest in their lives. Where he often saw numbers, she saw people. Where he guarded his trust, she gave hers freely. At first, Daniel kept his distance, telling himself he was simply giving someone a second chance. But slowly, he began to stop by the office, pretending to check on progress while his eyes inevitably searched for her. He caught glimpses of Emily laughing with colleagues, offering encouragement, or scribbling notes with intense focus. Each glimpse chipped away at his old belief that wealth was the only measure of success. One evening, After most of the staff had gone, he found her still at her desk, sorting through a stack of reports. "You don't have to stay this late," he said, leaning on the doorway. She glanced up with a small smile. "I don't mind. It feels good to have a place where I belong." That simple sentence pierced through him. Belonging. It was something he had never admitted he longed for, something money had never been able to buy. As he watched her gather her things, he felt a quiet gratitude he hadn't known in years. Over the weeks, Emily's presence extended beyond the office. She stopped by his mansion occasionally, sometimes to discuss work, other times just to share a meal. She never looked at his wealth with envy or awe. She treated his grand home the same way she treated his smallest office, with respect, but never intimidation. Her laughter echoed in rooms that had been silent for too long, and the emptiness he had carried within him began to feel less heavy. One night, as they walked side by side through the city streets where they had first met, Daniel realized the truth with startling clarity. The miracle was not in what he had given her, but in what she had given him. She had returned to him something he hadn't even known he had lost, his heart. Months passed, and the rhythm of life began to change for both Daniel and Emily. What had started as an act of compassion slowly grew into something deeper, something neither of them had planned for but both quietly welcomed. Their connection wasn't built on grand gestures or lavish gifts. It was formed in the simple moments, the shared dinners after long days, the quiet conversations over coffee, the comfortable silences that no longer felt empty. Daniel had once thought happiness was measured in deals closed and fortunes secured, but now he found it in Emily's laughter echoing through his home. Emily, too, had transformed. The woman who once asked timidly for leftovers now walked with her head high, her confidence blooming in ways that inspired everyone around her. She poured herself into her work, not just for herself, but for the brother she cared for, and for the future she was building. Daniel admired her resilience, but more than that, he admired her heart. She reminded him daily that true strength wasn't in power or wealth, but in kindness and perseverance. Together, they began to dream bigger. One evening, as they sat in his study, Daniel shared an idea that had been growing inside him. "I want to start something with you," he said. "A foundation, not just to feed people for a night, but to give them chances, like the one you asked me for. A place where no one has to feel ashamed for needing help." Emily's eyes lit up, her hands tightening around his as tears threatened to spill. "Do you really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more," he answered. From that night on, they worked side by side, planning, building, and creating. The foundation opened months later, its doors wide to families, single mothers, children, and anyone who needed a hand. Emily became its heart, welcoming each person with the same dignity she once longed for. Daniel watched her with pride, realizing that she had given his wealth purpose it had never known before. Their bond only grew stronger, no longer defined by the night they met, but by the future they were building together. It wasn't just about saving one another, it was about becoming partners, equals, and companions in a life that was fuller than either had imagined. On a quiet evening, standing in front of the foundation they had built, Emily slipped her hand into Daniel's. The lights glowed softly behind them, the sound of laughter and gratitude spilling into the night. She leaned against him, her voice gentle. "It's hard to believe this all began with leftovers." Daniel smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "No," he whispered, "it began with a miracle." The foundation grew faster than either Daniel or Emily had anticipated. What began as a small initiative soon caught the attention of the community, then the city, and eventually, the press. Journalists flocked to write about the wealthy businessman and the young woman who once lived on the edge of despair but now stood as the symbol of hope. Yet for Daniel and Emily, it wasn't about the attention, it was about the people who walked through their doors every day with eyes that mirrored the same hunger, fear, and quiet determination Emily once carried. Emily thrived in her new role. She greeted every visitor personally when she could, offering warm meals, encouragement, and most importantly, dignity. Her brother Michael had become a part of it too, volunteering after school, learning from both Emily and Daniel what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. Watching her brother smile again reminded Emily why she fought so hard to keep going during the darkest days. Daniel, on the other hand, found himself evolving in ways he never thought possible. The man who once measured his life in profits now measured it in lives touched. He was still the sharp businessman, but there was a gentleness about him now, a warmth that his employees and partners noticed. Emily had shown him that wealth wasn't truly wealth unless it was shared. Of course, challenges came. There were days when the foundation's resources felt stretched too thin, or when critics questioned their motives. But Daniel and Emily faced it together, never allowing doubt to drive them apart. If anything, adversity only bound them closer, reminding them of the night their worlds collided in the most unexpected way. Their relationship deepened in quiet, unspoken ways. Daniel no longer dined alone at his long, polished table. Emily was there, filling the silence with stories, laughter, or simply her presence. She had a way of softening the hard edges of his life, and he, in turn, gave her stability and the assurance that she would never have to face the world alone again. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Daniel brought Emily back to the restaurant where they first met. The same dim lights glowed, the same quiet hum of conversation filled the air. As they sat at the very table where Emily had once asked for his leftovers, Daniel reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box before her. Her breath caught as she opened it to find a simple, elegant ring glistening inside. Daniel's voice trembled, with emotion as he spoke. "That night, you asked me for food, but you gave me something I didn't even know I was starving for. Love, hope, and a reason to live beyond myself. Emily, will you spend the rest of your life with me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, and just like that, the story that began with leftovers found its true ending in love.